the third year now, a panel about some of the ongoing struggles, environmental justice struggles happening here in Virginia. Also, for the past 3 years, I've been assisted in putting these panels together by Gustavo Angeles from the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club, who can't join us today, but he's been essential in helping to get people ready to do these sessions. So thank you, Gustavo. And so today we're gonna feature 3 different panelists. We're gonna lead off today's panel with a presentation by Dr. Lakshmi Fjord, who is a visiting scholar at the University of Virginia's Department of Anthropology. She's going to talk about her path-breaking work in Union Hill. That's where the Atlantic Coast Pipeline was going to run through. And in our first panel 3 years ago, we featured the Lowrys speaking on that. She's going to speak to her work documenting the existence of an African-American community of Union Hill, and how her work was essential to securing that fabulous court victory in the Friends of Buckingham case decided by the Fourth Circuit. So that's how we're going to kick it off. Then we're going to hear from Lavisha Rollins from Concerned Citizens of Charles City County, which Charles City County, as you will learn, is an overburdened community, environmental justice community facing multiple environmental onslaughts. And then lastly, we're going to have a tag team of Renita Harris and Fritsch, who are going to speak about a controversy brewing in a part of the state called Ashland, Virginia, more specifically the Brown Grove community, another historic African-American community that has been already the site of multiple industrial insults and onslaughts that has greatly diminished that community, and you'll hear more about that. So the first thing I'm going to ask is just for the panelists quickly to introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to Dr. Fjord's presentation.
Yes, we've been asked to introduce ourselves and say what we're going to talk about. Steve kind of did that as well, but I just wanted to say, so for the past 7 years, I've been working full time to use my professional anthropological expertise as a full-time volunteer with newly threatened EJ communities. My collaborations with key local African-American descendants of free Black founders of these communities began in Union Hill in 2014. Though most people know that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline's Virginia air permit in Union Hill was overturned, few understand the strategic planning and extent of our community research and methods. So I'll use Union Hill to highlight regulatory and political inequities that continue corporate siting of toxic polluting infrastructure in various Virginia Black, Indigenous, and Appalachian rural historic lands and majority EJ urban neighborhoods. That makes EJ community siting a major driver of rapid climate change. Yet no carbon offsets promised by toxic polluters will shift the health burdens of their operations on these specific Black and Indigenous communities we discussed today. I will present our on-the-ground methods used to move the needle in Virginia towards political and public recognition of environmental justice.
Great. Lavisha, would you like to go next?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Good afternoon. Thanks for everybody for having me. I'm with C5, which stands for Concerned Citizens of Charles City County. We were founded in June of 2019. We're a diverse group of citizens or people who are from Charles City County who are actively involved in the community. And we're trying to preserve the natural resources and history that is located in Charles City. A lot of people don't know where Charles City is, so I'll give you a brief indicator. We're in between Richmond and Williamsburg. That's basically where we fall. We're a small rural community, and we were threatened by 2 large power plants as of June 2019, but we're happy to report that we're down to 1. We defeated 1. So I'll be talking to you about the current struggles that we're facing, how we're identified by other companies to come and develop in our area, and what we're potentially facing currently, and lessons learned as we continue to learn on organizing and fighting these injustices. Thanks.
Great. Renata, would you like to go next, and then followed up by Chris?
Yes, I am Renita Harris, and by no means am I expert on this panel. I am actually in the learning process of learning how to fight EJ. I am an entrepreneur by day and turned activist for my community by night. And let me tell you, this is definitely like, it definitely could be a full-time job, but it's, I don't have the time to do full-time, but it's definitely like a part-time job, and you have to go all in, and it's overwhelming. At night, my head is spinning, but I just want to talk to you guys about Brown Grove community, and I'm representing the Brown Grove Preservation Group. And we just started in the beginning of 2020 during the pandemic. And currently we are opposing a Wegmans distribution center in our neighborhood that is 220 acres. So this will be the 5th industrial business in our neighborhood. And I just want to talk to you about some strategies that we are using to help fight and keep our historic district historic.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Fritsch, and I am the Environmental and Climate Justice Chair for the Hanover County NAACP. We've been working with the Brown Grove community and Renata and her family members throughout this process that's been going on over the last year regarding the proposed Wegmans distribution center. I'm an environmental professional. I've been doing this work professionally for almost about 23 years from a wide variety of perspectives as a regulator in the private sector and also working for a number of nonprofits. So those kind of experiences we've been bringing to the table, and I'll be talking a little bit about the capacity support that we've been providing to the community as NAACP.
Okay, so Dr. Fjord, you're up.
Yes, Salem, could you please open my PowerPoint?
Certainly. Up.
Okay, so this is just an intro placeholder to kind of name what I'm hoping to do with the environmental justice community strategic methods and identify regulatory inequities. Next. Here's a non-discernible map of Virginia in which these the 5 cited sites are in red, and they just kind of give the range because Union Hill now is fighting open pit gold mining after we won the ACP issue. So Pine Grove Cumberland won't be discussed today, was discussed in earlier symposiums, but as you know, you'll hear from the other 2. And the other one I want to bring to your attention is the Bannister District. The NAACP of Pennsylvania is leading that fight. Next, please. So what did we do? What we're calling citizen science, which is community participatory action research led by African-American cultural experts. And why do we have to do that? Well, in our present unjust regulatory environment, local, federal, and state regulatory agencies and political leaders have relied solely on corporate developers' statements of promises of jobs, market needs. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and Army Corps of Engineers for their permits solely privilege as facts only the developer generated data about infrastructure, health, air and water impacts. They haven't undertaken their own site investigations with local public participation in any of these places under NEPA, required by NEPA, for required environmental justice review, and under the Historic Preservation Act, Section 106, with consulting parties for historic cultural resources survey and archaeological review. That's a lot of words to say that there's a lot of missing and wrong information. So what do? It requires, number one, identify every form of site-based evidence needed to counter that misinformation. And that requires, if you could advance this slide, that requires reading through thousands of, that puts the burden on communities and their allies to closely read thousands of pages of application and permits for site-based evidence. And in this case, what I found in thousands of pages was hidden in all different sections was what exactly the infrastructure was going to be located in this small site surrounded closely by African-American families. And this was the same thing that happened in Wegmans permits, where they left out major diesel generators that needed to be considered before a permit was approved. Advancing the slide, please. So another example of what happens then when FERC uses only ACP, in our case, data, is that they manage to hide all of the evidence that's necessary in site-based comparisons. So for all of these sites, for a toxic development, they have to give alternate sites. So how does the developer make sure that the site that they want, which in these cases are all in EJ communities, is the one chosen or franked by FERC? So in this case, they gave them no data. They gave FERC, they pretended that these were not two different sites, one of which was less than half the size, that had, that didn't talk about race. They didn't talk about its 5 times larger density that in the Union Hill site. And they didn't talk about all the 23 acres of National Register wetlands. Please advance the slide. So number 2, we also, so that we have to put those into the record, but we have to actually get data. We have to get all of this data to put it into the permit records to actually counter these emissions. So we have to excavate beneath layers in the case of historical erasure in records and loss of historic, indigenous, and freedom-built resources, and the problems with census issues in indigenous and Black majority communities in Virginia. Please advance the slide. So for example, for Union Hill, Virginia VCRES, or these are the archived records, have 0 cultural resources for Union Hill and almost all of Buckingham, when in comparisons that were used in ACP's application for all the other ACP counties, ACP impacted. So we tried to get consulting party status with FERC, but they refused. And I then filed most endangered historic place listing with Preservation Virginia. Please advance the slide. How do we get this information? Well, we have to look to our cultural experts. So I turned to Mr. Charles White, who'd spent 45 years researching Buckingham Black history, to fill a void that you'll read the reason why. The problem was that none of that research, because of this arson, was available for the required site specific. So the 68.5 acres that Dominion had purchased from former white plantation owner descendants for this. So we had to do that work. He directed me to University of Virginia Special Collections that had been closed to him as a man of color. The other way, we ground truthed oral narratives. So John W. Laurie, whom was referenced as having been in the last symposium, and Ada Claiborne Washington found the GIS points of their former segregated school by using daffodils they planted, the paths of the spring We used oral history to find lost community historic burial resources, such as the first time Charles Jefferson Harper, who's a descendant of Betsy Hemings, whose father was Thomas Jefferson, spoke about his family relationship to the Variety Shade plantation burials. So we could include those. By doing so, we filled in these 0 Virginia historic cultural resources with an entire map of cultural resources. And through our community study, which I'll describe next, door to door, we found that 62% are interrelated descendants of formerly enslaved people who built the community. Please advance this slide. So 3, we have to uncover the factual data on household race, numbers, pre-existing health conditions, family heritage, and kinship with households, their burial sites, their land uses, their places of recreation, their businesses. And these are to get all that evidence and then submit all of that evidence in public comments. And public comments are legal records. And all of this information has to be in to each permit at the local, state, and federal level in order for you to appeal the approvals of these permits through lawsuits. We did it to use Historic Preservation Act Section 106 to challenge and register for eligibility. And we used it for baseline testing of present air quality and water wells in case this horrible structure were built. Next slide. Misuses of census tract data. This is how Dominion and then Virginia DEQ misrepresented the numbers of people who would be most impacted. If you can see, this is a map of the county of Buckingham with 3 census blocks, 3 census tracts that intersect at the exact location represented by the circle, with the dot in the middle being the actual compressor station site. So first, Dominion tried to say that the only people there was the amount of people in the whole sparse Buckingham average census. Then they used the data from the 3 tracts, all of which are average majority white. So the door-to-door study had to be undertaken by us to get factual data where people do not open their doors to strangers and are often away because 1 or 2 jobs are common. Next slide. We created this map of the 100 households that are densely clustered around the yellow space with the pink square that was to be the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And we reached 77%, which is incredibly robust for any social science study and is unbelievable where they don't open the door even to census tract. And these were our findings, that it was 83.5% minority, of which that was mostly African-American and Native American, African-American biracial identity. And we found it was 600% more populated. Please advance the slide. And you don't have to read this, but this is what you do with your data in order to prove it. So this is a study statistics sheet. So we translate this into statistics. And then at the bottom, I really want to bring your attention to the fact that we found from 67 households, we could get extensive answers that included pre-existing medical conditions for 59% of reached households. And it lists the kinds of conditions. Please advance the slide, which then match together with recruiting nationally known EJ Health scientists who then made public comments in our public comment period about the impacts on these exact people with these exact pre-existing conditions. We were able to have the evidence in place for the Fourth Circuit Court to overturn this decision, and also to have placed in the public record that we wanted electric turbines because they would have almost eliminated all PM 2.5 disproportionate health impacts. Next slide. So how do we do this? This was very difficult because nobody wanted to speak up in a county where white and Black people who are descended from former plantation owners and former enslaved people live in the same community. There was a culture of silence. So we needed to build up our spirit and divide up the comments by topics into 3 minutes, so we could get all of our data into oral and written comments. Next. So we have 2 historic wins for the Union Hill community door-to-door study. And the second, which I'll talk about next, which we already know about. And then the second, which I'll spend a tiny bit more time on, is that this slide documents our historic win for Union Hill when under Section 106 protective historic register eligibility was given for the first time to a free Black built historic district. And the board cited as groundbreaking our ethnographic methods, proposing our PIF be the template for all historic Black communities in Virginia and former slave states to use. The board's decision shifted DHR, that's the Department of Historic Resources, practices immediately. When we brought the historic cultural resources of Brown Grove to DHR's Mark Wagner, for example, he told us he immediately used the Union Hill template to begin his unprecedented, intensive, collaborative PIF making work, that's what it's called, the application, with local community expert Diane Smith Drake, through which the historic Brown Grove Baptist Church, then Brown Grove Residential Community, received protective historic eligibility in record time. With Muriel Miller Branch, I'm co-writing a revised Pine Grove School Rural Historic District PIF, now including all historic roads, plantations built by former enslaved laborers, segregated train station, and many more, as contributing Black historic resources, which we submit to DHR next week. In sum, taken together, the tangible changes within the department, this Virginia department of DHR, to now not only recognize the Virginia and national historic significance of free Black founded community resources, but also to provide hands-on support of community researchers and writers for the first time, points to a true shift towards restorative justice in Virginia. Thank you.
Sorry, just too many buttons to push here. Thank you very much, Dr. Fjord. If there are questions, I would ask that people post them in the chat, and we will get to them at the conclusion of our panel. So our next speaker is Lavisha from Concerned Citizens of Charles City County. Lavisha, are you running your slides? You need me for that.
I can do the slides. I just would need to get permission to share. Oh, she's on it. Never mind. Got it. All right. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me. I just wanted to present to you guys what C5 is currently doing, what we have done, and what we're looking to do in the future. So the screen you see here is our logo, and everyone wants to know what C5 stands for. It's Concerned Citizens of Charles City County, the 3 C's. So learning from people who are doing it. When we first started out, as Renata said earlier, we had an idea that we were going to be holding up picket signs and just saying, don't come here, and then sign a couple petitions, and then it was over. Never imagined how many hours, how many documents, how much time, meetings that this all entails when you're dealing with environmental injustices that, these communities face. And as Dr. Ford said below, these documents aren't, a pamphlet of 3 or 4 pages. It's thousands of documents of time that you're reading. And so we were just basically a group of people, as you can see here, our founding members and consultants that we have. We are missing a few people in this picture, but this is the majority of C5's founding membership, that we basically had to rely on other organizations to help propel us. And so I just wanted to show that information, some background on us. As I stated, the map shows you where we're located. the county adopted a slogan that was called 4 centuries, 3 cultures, 2 rivers in 1 county, because the 2 rivers that basically border us are the Chickahominy and the James River, which ironically, when you see further in the slides, basically our power plant sits right in the middle of those. So that's where the proposed development would be. Our population is about 6,900 people with about 2,500 to 2,600 houses that are in the community. And as you can see, our demographics are 49%, African-American, 40% white, and 7% Native American. And our population right now is currently in a flux because a lot of people are trying to leave because of these developments. Well, we are a great beholder of a beautiful landfill, saying that sarcastically, that we got in 1990 that right now occupies approximately 350 to 400 acres. And this landfill was brought to us in 1990. We are one of the mega landfills in Virginia. And so this is currently a pollutant that we have. We've been targeted since the early 90s. And so we have this development here. And basically a lot of the things that the landfill has done is that it's created a lot of, the smell is horrendous, especially a day like today and where we're at. The humidity is heightened and the smells and the off-gassing is heightened for these communities. And residences are literally lined along the perimeter of the landfill. So the impacted community, which is predominantly African-American and Indigenous people, they're literally inhaling directly from this site. And so this is what we currently have that is already in production. So what are we dealing with now? We have 2 proposed power plants that were proposed in Charles City County. So if you look to the left, it was C4GT, which is a power plant. And if you look to your right, it was a Chickahominy power plant. They're not even a mile apart from each other. The Chickahominy power plant will be the 5th largest in the nation. So we would be one of the beholders of a gas plant that would probably be stranded assets in the next 20 years. And that these 2 would have been within a mile of each other. And if you can see our map where all the residences are, just within that mile of, these developments, you can see that they're directly impacted the residents of Charles City County. So here are the emissions. As you can see, we currently have the Injinko, which is a off-gassing plant that operates off of our landfill. And with the 2 proposed plants that we were going to get, we would have 13,996,787,616 tons of pollutants that would be coming to our area. And this is information you can get off of DEQ's website to kind of show you exactly how much would be dumped within a mile of each other. We're not talking about sporadically placed within the county, so everyone gets a fair dose of this amount of pollution. No, it's all strategically in one location, and it's all being dispersed on residents that live in that area. We're also now introduced a Chickahominy pipeline that will be running through Louisa, Hanover, Henrico, Charles City County, that would provide a new gas line to power these power plants. So right now we're fighting against that as well. So we have, as I said, we were able to stop one development. The C4GT is no longer coming, so that is gone, goodbye. Now we have a Chickahominy pipeline that is coming along, and we're still fighting the Chickahominy power plant that would need this pipeline to operate. So how did we get started? Well, number one, we had to do a lot of outreach and building in Charles City County. We had to canvass the area. We had to do newsletters. Social media was a big one for younger generations. Letters and calls to churches in rural communities is a big thing, because in a rural community, you can't just walk down the block and say, hey, just to let you know what's going on. I mean, you have to drive. Your neighbors are usually a half a mile away from you. So it's not like an urban development where you can reach a large amount of people in a small amount of time. This involved us actually sending physical letters, driving to their houses, door knocking, phone banking. And also on your left, you'll see a picture of an information session we had with residents of the community, letting them know what was going on. This development had been taking place since 2001, and none of the residents knew anything about it. They didn't know what was coming to their community. And by the time they heard, it was already within the DEQ having public hearings to let them know what the outcome was going to be. Another big thing is the trust. It takes a lot of trust building to get people to listen to you, because as Dr. Ford discussed previously, that a lot of the people in the political offices are saying things contrary to what you're saying. And so they're kind of stuck in the middle trying to believe, like, who am I to believe? Who's telling the truth? What exactly is the truth regarding my residents? Because a lot of these people that are living in these residents have been generationally passed down to occupy these places. These aren't just new developments that they're just building and occupying. Some are, but a lot of this is generational property that's being passed down. So they not only are losing a home, but they're losing a family legacy as well. So we made yard signs. We put them up throughout the county. The county ran over them with lawnmowers. They took them down. They put signs in front of them. So we did go out and do that. We collected hundreds of petitions. We collected over, I think it was 500 signatures within 24 hours, because we were only given a day's notice to notify the community what was going on. So the other things that we did was we did comment writing parties. One of the things that within this type of work is a lot of people don't know what to write. They don't know how to write these things, so that when they submit it to DEQ, DEQ can go up. They didn't address the right number regarding the notice. They didn't put down the actual type of development. So people don't want to waste their time. You know, that's a credibility issue. I wasted my whole day writing this letter. They didn't even submit it. So we did writing parties, let them know what was going on. We had DEQ actually come down and talk to them face to face, so that they knew that we weren't making this stuff up, that we were trying to do what was best and look at all parties. So we had them come out. We had public forums where we had experts come in that talked about what they did as far as with gas plants, how they operate. We wanted everyone to see that it came from different sides, and that we just didn't decide to wake up one morning and say, I think I'll go fight a power plant today. Then no, these are actually honest concerns that we have as well. And we want to make sure that we're being transparent with the community as well. Like I said, in rural communities, we don't have a community center that's located on every block. So a lot of our events were held at churches so that we could reach the community, especially the older members that don't, they're not on Facebook or social media every day, so that we have to keep them involved. So a lot of our meetings were held at churches. So the facts and food forms, we basically took donations within the group of C5, and we actually paid for food. We paid to feed them. If they were coming out on a Saturday or Sunday, you have to meet them where they are. You have to allow them to, have time to come to your event. So if they're going to come, you got to provide childcare and food so that working parents can come out and that their lives are not interrupted with you trying to educate them. Our newsletters, we made 2,300 newsletters to go out to the households. That is something that actually had a more profound effect than anything we did, because it was a tangible piece of paper that allowed people to actually see what was going on, what was going on. We actually did fundraising events where we actually provided food during the pandemic, where we basically got donations from other organizations. We worked with other organizations to help us. We gave out Easter baskets. We built floats for the community. So one of the things that I'm trying to kind of paint the picture for you guys is that we wanted the community to know that we weren't just out here about power plants. Like we're here to address your concerns and to help you in any way we can. So you have to make it more about the community and not just about your fight. Although you want their support, you have to resonate with them. You cannot come in just dogmatic about one element. And so we basically reached out in every capacity that we had. So wins. A lot of this work is tiring. As you heard from my other panelists, it's exhausting. And so when you have that victory, it kind of re-energizes you and your organization. So we are happy to report defeated the Header Improvement Project, along with the SAVE Committee, Sierra Club, AMD Pine Camp, Dr. Lakshmi Fjord, the HIP Committee, Moms Out Front, so many organizations. It was CCAN, it's like 40 organizations that we all work together and join forces. And we stopped a 24-mile pipeline that would have provided 3 new compressor stations within disadvantaged areas. So that's one of our victories from all of our hard work. The next C4GT in Charles City is gone. Patrick Wilson was a news reporter for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, did some investigation for us. We talked through it. We worked hard. We sent out letters, and they announced on July 11, 2021, that the plan for the power plant was canceled. But with 2 down, 3 came a knocking. So Chickahominy Pipeline is on the board. So Chickahominy Power Plant is still knocking at our doors. And guess what? Our landfill is getting bigger. They're looking to expand it and go from 300 to 1,800 acres. So how great is it that we're going to have this huge landfill, a power plant, and a pipeline? And guess what? In a minority Black community. How coincidental. Saying that sarcastically, but that's the reality that you face in this work every day. So lessons learned. How do you go about organizing across race and class? Because here's the other part. It is a minority community, but we need everyone. It's not just about Black people. It's about everyone has to work together, because it's not just affecting minority communities, it's affecting white communities, indigenous communities, Asian, all types of racial communities are being affected. And guess what? It has no discrimination on your health. That's what the biggest threat to you is that your health is going to be impacted. So one of the things when you're organizing is know your role and support one another, because it's tiring. Build relationships with each other and trust in your community. If your community does not trust you, it's not going to work. People who live in the community need to vote. If you don't live here, then you shouldn't vote on what happens here. And the community will appreciate that, because they're going to feel like those who are really vested are going to be the ones that make the better decision for them. As everyone knows, divide and conquer is what you need. So divide and conquer means you find a common enemy, and that is the person that fuels you to keep going. Understand that everyone in your group has a weakness. Everyone in your group has a strength. If you build off of each other's strength to counter the weaknesses, then there are no weaknesses in your group, but you have to acknowledge that. Acknowledge when you have problems in your group. It's going to happen. Failure is going to happen. Learn from it. Move on. It's no point in talking about it after it's done. It's done. Just move forward. Be honest and open with one another about all facets. As you can see, C5 has so many different ethnic backgrounds. It's because we talk about race. We talk about being Black, talk about being white. What does that look like? What can I not do? What can you do? What am I going to be looked at differently about if I speak? So be strategic on that. Communicate using more than internet. I know all the young folks, y'all love internet. Everyone don't like the internet. Be open to writing. Learn how to write. It's a great skill. Hold meetings in places that are not convenient. Don't just have meetings at your house. Somebody may not like you. And so you need to have it in other places so people will feel more open and won't feel threatened by having it in one place, because that can be a deterrent. Build relationships with your community, your churches. And like I said, everyone doesn't want to talk about power plants every time you meet. They don't want to talk about that. So make sure that what you're doing, that this is one of your issues, but that you're relating to everybody and everything in the community. Discuss race. Please don't walk away from that topic. You have to talk about it. It's uncomfortable. It's not something that you want to sit over dinner and talk about, but you need to do that if you're going to have a group that understands the dynamics of cultures and race. Trust is key. If someone in your group is not willing to work with you, or that they're going out and sharing information, it's not going to work. Trust is a major factor. Your organizational structure has to be in place, or your organization is not going to run smoothly. Determine who's doing what and why. Disagreements are good. If everyone and every time you say something, everybody shakes their head, yes, great, it's wonderful, this is not the right people to have in your group. Disagreements means that everyone is passionate about finding the right answer. You need disagreements, but not disrespect. Money. This environmental movement, y'all kill me with this. Like, money is not needed, okay? Money and fundraising is needed, okay? So please know, you're gonna have to do some things you don't wanna do as far as going out and talking to different organizations and people. Nothing ethically or morally wrong, don't do that. Don't sell out to the man. But I'm saying you're gonna need money. It's not gonna fall from the sky. You can't pray it into existence. You have to work and get money or your organization is not gonna run. It is very important. And the last thing, if you want to be a successful organization, pray to whoever you believe in, meditate, implement, and repeat.
Great.
And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Renata. I'm going to just need 1 second to get your thing going. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 more second because it's gotta. All right. Don't know why it's there. We go.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say, like Lavisha, like I feel you for real. Like our stories are the same. I really feel like I don't even need to talk because our stories are exactly the same. In so many other EJ communities, our stories are the same. But I just want to talk to you about Brown Grove and the community that I'm from. And one thing that really irks my nerve is when you talk about an EJ community, everyone says that we are on welfare or that we are low income. No, my community, we work. They've always worked. My ancestors, my great-grandmother, all of us, we worked. And we are homeowners. My parents own their home, my aunts, uncles, they own their homes. So we are not low income and we're not lazy. But one thing that we are is we're overlooked and they don't see us as a intact community group. And so one thing about Brown Grove is we're one of the oldest continuously inhabited African-American communities settled by freed slaves, where the descendants still live in the community today. So a little bit about the location is we are near, if everyone knows where King's Dominion is, if you're from the East Coast. So if you go down south past King's Dominion about 15 minutes, you will see Brown Grove. If you've gotten to downtown Richmond, you're too far. So Brown Grove is a community where when I was young, you could ride your bike down to my cousin's house. You would see the bikers, they would be riding down the street. And that's not the case anymore, because for the past 60 years, things have been coming into the community. But against all odds, we're standing up for ourselves. So what we have in the community now, we have 95 that has cut the community in half. That was over 60 years ago. They cut the community. So you have Brown Grove 1, now you have Brown Grove 2. We have a TA truck stop that's bringing tractor trailers in daily. I don't even know the count of how many tractor trailers come into a large truck stop like that. We are right by the municipal airport. So you have the airplanes flying over top of the homes daily. You have a concrete facility company that's in the neighborhood. Then we have a construction debris landfill as well. And like Lavisha said, they are expanding as well. And now we have Wegmans that wants to come into our community, and it's 220 acres. It's going to be a 24-hour facility. And all of these cumulative things are what make us an EJ community and what makes it environmental racism and what makes it a health crisis. So when you look at what, when we heard about this facility that's coming into our community, it was sold to us as a done deal. There's nothing that you can do about it. And previously, the older people in the community, they tried to fight other things that were coming, like the landfill and the concrete facility, and they went to the Board of Supervisors meeting. And of course, they always voted in favor of the facility coming in because it would bring tax dollars. And after that, I thought that, well, they thought that, okay, that's all that we can do. But now we're learning, no, there's more that we can do. We can now fight these things other ways. And the Wegmans Distribution Center, it's going to be a 24-hour facility. It's 6 stories tall. It's going to be bringing in diesel fumes from the trucks daily. And it is 24-hour noise from the trucks coming in, from the generators. There are going to be an estimated about 2,800 vehicle cars from their employees. There's going to bring 700 jobs. Everyone says, oh, it's going to bring 700 jobs to the community, but they're low-paying jobs. And they're not saving jobs for the community members. So it's bringing jobs to the rest of the Tri-Cities area, but we have to bear the brunt of everything else that this facility is going to bring. So you have employees coming into our community to go to work, then they have to leave to go to lunch, and they have to come back from lunch, then they have to leave again to go home. So that's going to be a lot of fumes in our community. It's going to be more accidents because it's a residential 2-lane curvy road. And on our church camera, you see accidents all the time, about 1 a month, where the cars are flipping over in front of the church. And you have 24-hour lights that are going to be shining into the community, into a country community. And that's going to have an effect on the very essence of what makes us not an EJ community, but a historic district. And also they are actually going to be building on top of a African-American slave cemetery. We have cemeteries all throughout our neighborhood, and we don't have cemeteries where, well, we do have some known cemeteries, but back in the day, those cemeteries were not marked. So they would mark them maybe with a stone or a plate. And when they did the site discovery, they discovered artifacts in the woods, but they don't know the background of the community to say that, oh, this is a burial ground. So on top of burying on top of these graves that we're trying to prove their existence, but they won't allow us access to the land to prove their existence without them being there and walking alongside with us. There's going to be destruction of 15 acres of wetlands as well. And I'm going to allow Chris to talk about the wetlands.
Sure, and I think just to get started with this, the map that everybody's seeing here is from a 1938 topographic map. When we were talking about the cultural and historical resource aspect of this, the company that Wegmans hired to do their archaeological work did a fairly extensive phase 1 archaeological dig in the area, but they used a technique that was called shovel test pits. And they basically did it at the maximum amount or the minimum amount that was allowable by state standards. One of the things that first got our attention when we saw this report come out initially in December 2019 is this particular map. And what you'll notice is that the property boundary footprint, which is outlined in red, is shifted to the west outside of obvious geographical features that you would see, such as the roads that you would expect about the property. Next slide, please. What this basically did was it shifted so that the Brown Grove School, which was the segregational school the community utilized during that the time of segregation to educate the children, was originally reported not to be on the site. This next map that's available in that report actually has the boundary properly shifted back. So you can see in the northwestern area of it, the church and the school site is actually on the property. With the wetland situation, this is what the wetland delineation map currently looks like. And without getting into the hardcore details of this, there's a lot of inaccuracies. We know that wetlands don't stop at property boundary areas. And we've got a number of photographs that we're going to show where that cutout is to the north of the area, where we can document that there's wetlands that are going to be impacted by this project because they're going to be developing the downstream area. They're effectively going to be draining the water off of wetlands off-site that are hydraulically connected to those that are on-site. There's also a number of other technical issues, and we can really spend hours talking about how administratively the proper techniques throughout this entire thing was not properly followed by the consultants, by the regulators overseeing the consultants, and those who should have provided the checks and balances in place. But these photographs right here show high quality wetlands that are off-site, that are directly connected to those wetlands on-site. That middle photograph shows Bagman Moss. And for those who know a little bit about ecology, the only place Bagman Moss grows is in a wetland condition. So we've got some pretty good evidence. This is some high quality wetland areas. And it's also part of why you see so much flooding in the area. If you look at the Brown Grove area, historically, the reason people settled here is that it was considered to be somewhat wasteland for a lot of folks. So after the Civil War, this is where people holed up at because it was the least desirable land for the area for the people who actually were property owners. So that's how the community eventually settled here. And then after I-95 came in the early 1960s, and you have two interchanges bracketing the community, that's what ultimately led to this area now becoming highly desirable and land values going up because of easy access for transportation. That's why you see all the industrialism, industrial complexes that are now in the area. On the NAACP side with the Hanover County branch, what we've really been trying to do is work with the community to bring in the resources from a technical aspect, working with other stakeholders in the area, but also bring in a little bit of the oomph that's necessary to kind of move forward in challenging the permits that unfortunately have been issued for this particular project. And so we're currently representing the Brown Grove community members in a state challenge against this, and we're currently exploring a federal challenge as well. So there's a lot going on here. We are very hopeful and we feel very good about our odds because there's so many administrative errors that have been made in the issuance of the permit program that it allows us to really get into the technical aspect, which courts typically would not want to otherwise get into. But because the administrative issues are so vast, we believe that we'll be able to get the technical issues in front of a judge to be able to listen to openly and thoughtfully. With that, I'll step back. Renata, if you want to take over from here again.
And what we're battling is we're battling the governor and the powers that be. And Wegmans was recruited to come into our community. They were given almost $7 million to come into our community and destroy our community by Hanover County. So when you're dealing with legislators and these agencies, you have to hold them accountable. And I just want to read a statement from Governor Northam. He stated that establishing the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice would ensure communities are directly involved in the decisions that affect them most and will help prevent vulnerable Virginians from being disproportionately impacted by pollution, climate change, and environmental hazards. Now, this all sounds good, and it seems like he's trying to do something for the EJ communities, but he fully supports Wegmans coming into our neighborhood. And he says, Wegmans will be good neighbors. And so it's bringing 700 jobs under his belt. So it will make him look like a good governor. But I just want to close out. My time is running out, but some of the things that we're doing as a community to fight this machine is we're reclaiming our community. We are trying to educate the community about the past things that have been going on and the current situation and the health impacts of it. And just like Lavisha said, they are doing the work. They are holding the meetings with the community. They are the ones that are doing those things. And it should be the agencies that are doing that for the communities. We're not supposed to be going door to door trying to get them aware of what's going on in their neighborhood. That's what those agencies are supposed to do. And so we have to empower the people that live within these communities. And one of the other things that I'm not going to go through everything, but one of the other things is connecting with organizations and hosting town halls and connecting with people like Lakshmi from Union Hill and Chris, who have the knowledge. And we have to hold these agencies and government officials accountable. And whatever their job description is, we have to hold them accountable to their job description and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. The DEQ, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're the ones that should be doing the surveys and having the water testing. And like Lakshmi said, submitting comments. So all of those things are definitely important to fight.
Okay, great. I've been monitoring the chat and have not seen any questions come up. So if people do have questions, please put them in the chat. We do have a question for all of the panelists that we'd like to do first. But if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. So the question for all of the panelists, and I'm going to do it in reverse order. So Chris, Renata, Lavisha, and then Dr. Fjord, can you tell us what you would like to see in terms of policy changes or other kinds of changes to address the health threats to your community?
Well, I think that one of the things that we all here would support is a more thoughtful and systematic way to address environmental justice on the front end of any kind of permitting decision process, be that at the federal level, be it at the state level, even in local land planning, land use decision-making processes. There are incredible gaps that are missing there. So our agencies who should be doing the work on behalf of the people really need a more thoughtful approach. You know, one of the other things I would say is that as the environmental community, social justice communities and everything, we also have to up our game as well and really try to bridge this divide that exists so that communities like Brown Grove, like Charles City County, Union Hill, and all these other ones who have historically been isolated have like a clearinghouse or a place to go to that they can find the resources they need to become mobilized. And it's an area that I think is lacking right now because we're in this really weird intersection between social justice and environmental protection or natural resource management. And it's not an area that environmental groups, at least here in the Commonwealth, have been very strong about historically. And there's opportunity for improvement.
I would say that these companies that are getting awarded with these grants, they need to cross all the T's and dot all the I's before they're awarded this money. Because in our case, they're just sliding through the permits without having to complete an MOA or without having to complete the NEPA process. So that's one of the things that I think that should be implemented in policy. And also, when the community gives some feedback to these agencies like the DEQ and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they should read it and acknowledge it and not just breeze past it, because we've been asking for an archaeologist that has background in African-American studies to be on the site visit to discover these graves. We've been asking for a GPR survey, which is ground penetrating radar, to discover the graves. And none of those requests have been acknowledged. So I think those are the things that they should implement as far as when they're being awarded monies.
So some of the changes that I can tell you, being in this process, as Chris and Renata all have said, I echo those sentiments. The other process is that within the permitting process for any other resident or any other development, you have to have all of your ducks in a row first. Like, you have to have things implemented, you have to provide adequate assessment. But for these things, you can get your permit awarded to you before you even have your idea together. I mean, you literally can go and say, I think this is how it'll work. Here's an idea. Give me a permit to have this built. So I think that one of the things that I would like to see is a more adequately assessed process on how these companies are going to have these power plants built and how it's going to operate, so that it's strategically and set in stone, so that the community can do a thorough assessment of what this impact is going to be to the community. Because a lot of times they propose one thing and what's actually built is totally different. So like Charles City was supposed to have water-cooled turbines in their facility for our power plant. They're now looking at hydrogen turbines for Charles City, which is a new science, so the effects are not known. That's not what we were originally told. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing that I think they need to do is they need to be a little bit more economically savvy from that standpoint. If you look at where these power plants and developments are placed from a financial standpoint, it really isn't the best place, because all the pipelines that are needed, all the studies, all the surveys, all the wetland mitigation, all that money that's put up front is needed to get it built. Whereas maybe if you locate in another area or a closer area, then it can be a lot more feasible. But because those areas have the resources to negate what you say, and they have lawyers and they have people of intelligence in certain areas that can go after you and stop you, you won't do that. So I think those things will be put into the forefront, and that it's not always about, it is about the money, right? Because if you were to put those things closer to the developments, then you wouldn't need as much money. So I think those are the type of things that I like the government to acknowledge and say it. And the other thing is that, not to hold up time, but if they're going to strategically target minority communities, then say that. I chose you because you have low land. This is what it is. Stop doing the smoke and mirrors to confuse them, because what it does is that it creates more contention within the neighborhood and it divides them, which makes it even easier for them to divide and conquer and take over those areas. So transparency, being real about the money, and actually having a more strategic process on how they even apply to begin with.
I'd like to speak to the question that talked about what clearinghouse we might envision, and say that based on the 7 years of work in different communities that have had different strategies that are different stages, I've been developing with kind of a key group of community experts, a scientific expert, whatever, the people who do that you all know and work with, the Mary Finley Brooks, and also all of the community experts, which all of you are, to formulate the EJ Action Hub, which is just my word for it. Doesn't have to be that name, but it's to locate in one place all of the resources for what we already have learned for these methods. You know, what the biggest problem has been that there's a lot of misunderstanding about how to do this work. And you immediately, you know, as soon as people get the notice that this is going to be nearby, they're under this enormous clock ticking for the various stages and permits. So the EJ Action Hub would be a platform that community groups would have free access to, that would locate all of the training that we would give in community participation, all of the archives of health impacts that we've done over 7 years of different types of infrastructure, fossil fuel infrastructure, all of the community ideas that Lavisha listed so well. And we had so many of them along the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, there wasn't time to mention, right? So there's a lot of creativity, a lot of work, a lot of redundant things that could be shared immediately if we had a platform. So the problem has been, I've been trying for 2 years to get funding for this. And this is in an environment in which environmental nonprofits, established environmental nonprofits, get funded for EJ support now, but a good many of them didn't do any of this kind of on the ground truthing, laborious types of work. And so the problem is that funder, you know, we need to sort of create a different environment of funding, where the idea is that no, we actually have to put the money in the hands of the communities that are facing these things, fund the kinds of things that work, like newsletters to all landowners, newsletters that Lavisha mentioned, and we did in Union Hill, but we had to scrape that money together, and it slows everything down. So these are just one of the 100 things that would be located on in this hub. And that has to do with an economic issue. So to address economic issues more generally, the environment in which fossil fuel and mega landfill corporations are receiving, I don't know how many thousands of hours of taxpayer staff time at the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality to go over these permits and make sure. I mean, we were told that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline air permit was failed 3 times by DEQ, and that DEQ fixed it 3 times. So why isn't that money and time being equally allotted to do the actual NEPA, well, that it's a state agency, but to do the Virginia State Clean Water and Clean Air Act required community site suitability studies, and to go in and really privilege the cultural expertise of the people on this panel and the people who I've had the privilege to work with in each of these communities, in Pine Grove, the NAACP in Pennsylvania County, and in each of you. So that all should be the people that they're meeting up with. They need to be leading those public participation events that then are site investigations. So there's many things that could be done. I know we just have a minute, so thank you for your time.
I just want to just echo Lakshmi real quick. The question that has in the chat about how can you convince your community the jobs promised are going to help them, tell them to apply. Tell them to go and apply for those jobs and see if they get it. That's how you convince them, because you can't convince them because they're going to make all these false promises that it's going to be these great jobs. It's going to be, also ask the question, what's a good paying job? Is $15 a good paying job? Can you live off of that? But tell them to go and apply. Ask them to contact the county administrator and say, I want to apply. And that'll convince them.
Great. Thank you, Lavisha. I think that's all that we have time for. I want to thank all of the panelists and everyone in the audience too. And next year there will be more, I'm sure, because Virginia is not unique in that it has multiple environmental justice things going on at once. So I'm sure we'll be able to, highlight some more next year. So thanks again and have a good year, and see you later in the conference. Thank you.